Well, welcome and sincere thanks for being here. My name is Danelle Huging. Some of you I know from different TEDx events, meetings, conversations. Others I've seen you at different community engagements, chamber mixers, that kind of thing. One thing I know is this room is a warm one full of people looking to do better. We can always do better, right? And that's why we're here at this TED Talk event tonight. I would like to take a moment here to recognize that we are on Treaty 1 territory and home of the Red River Métis. Can you please raise your hand so we're aware if you are a member of Treaty 1 First Nation? Woo, thank you guys. All right. This is the very first solo event for Jessica Dumas Coaching and Training. I'm sure you all have met Jessica. She's been migrating and mingling quite well throughout the room. As a community connector, you know that there's going to be some social media involved with the event. So on your tables, I mentioned earlier, you'll see the hashtags, the links, the websites. Please share your experiences online using the event hashtag identitystory. Pen and paper? I got a pen? No. Paper? You can almost have my first page. All right. Jessica's TEDx experience kicked off in October of 2017 when she is invited by the TEDx Exchange District, who I was a member of, I was one of their volunteers, to share her story of overcoming tragedy and how it might demonstrate a story of reconciliation and, as Jessica says, ultimately explains why she does the things she does. By a show of hands, who knows what TED is? Okay, so majority of us in the room. For those that are new to TED, the TED program is devoted to spreading ideas in the form of short, powerful talks. TED started in 1984 as a conference where technology, entertainment, and design, and today covers almost all topics in more than 100 languages around the world. TEDx is an international network that organizes TED events, celebrating locally driven ideas and elevating them to a global stage. That's the cool thing about what Jessica's taking on here. To hear more about why TEDx Exchange District had to have Jessica on their program, we are going to hear from another speaker and author, not to mention the chairperson of the TEDx Exchange District, Joseph Ranseth.
Hello, everybody. This is such a gratifying experience to come and to see the talk finally live in its form. For some who may, have been closer to this, it's been quite a journey getting to this point. And doing a TED Talk is a journey in and of itself, as Jessica, I'm sure, will share at some point. But when we sat down 2 years ago, really, we started discussing this idea of launching this event. We said we want to do something powerful to serve the community. And we had 3 goals in mind. One is we want to do something that elevates the quality of life for everyone in the community, right? Because we believe that a community can be judged not by the position of the most advantaged, but by the most marginalized. So what can we do that just elevates the quality of life for everyone? What can we do that changes the public dialogue, right? That gets people talking about important issues, the things that actually matter, that make a difference in people's lives. How do we get people talking about those things? And third, how do we put Winnipeg on the map in a new way, right? So that the rest of the world can see some of the beautiful stuff that's happening. Because, as someone who travels around the world, speaking and teaching, I believe that Winnipeg really embodies this essence of transformation, right? Of here's a city that has had its fair share of challenges and difficulties, and then takes them and transforms them into something beautiful. And I think, especially in recent years, we've seen a lot of that. And so with this mandate, we sat down and started asking the question, what are the ideas that need to be on the stage, right? That need to be talked about. And then once we got a sense of those ideas, who are the best people in the world to talk about these ideas? And we brought in speakers literally from around the world. We had people from the other side of the globe come in and speak at the event. And one name that kept coming up again and again and again was Jessica. And I knew right from the beginning that we needed Jessica to be a part of the event in one way or another. And she was one of the first people that I reached out to when I said, hey, we're thinking of doing this event. Do you want to be involved in some way? And then it became more and more clear after working with Sheena and other members of the speaker team that we needed Jessica on the stage, sharing her story, because it really was an idea we're spreading. And there's something beautiful to me, and I think we'll all see this, those of us who know Jessica. When you see someone that embodies the transformation that they talk about, and this idea of reconciliation and Jessica's story, anyone who knows her knows that she embodies that. And it's such a beautiful thing that, like, for us, it was just a no-brainer to have you on the stage. And for those of you who caught it live, you know what happened. Everyone in the room was moved, and it was incredibly touching. And Jessica, you are a world-class speaker. You shared the stage with some of the best there are, and just moved an audience. And even more so, what has happened since, in hearing people say, we saw her talk, and the impact that it's had, on behalf of everyone that has worked so tirelessly. Our fearless project manager, Lori, here, has made this more than a full-time job. On behalf of the entire TEDx Exchange District team, thank you for being who you are, because being who you are has had an impact on our community. And now that the talk is live, is going to ripple out, far beyond that. So thank you, congratulations, and everyone, please enjoy the talk. Thank you.
Whew. Thank you, Joseph. And yes, that was a great experience, being a part of the volunteer team there. If you haven't done it, volunteering in general is one of the best ways to get to know people, the best ways to meet people, and to do something proactive and positive in your community. And then to get into the events, because I know several of you had said, no, I haven't seen the event yet. I haven't. You're there. You get to see this firsthand. You guys are late to the party now. But we're having a party now to launch it for those that couldn't be there. So thank you very much, Joseph. All right, Jessica. When thinking about the idea of presenting her talk in this way, it caused her to have a lot of thoughts on identity, and therefore a lot of conversations on identity. Growing up in Winnipeg, disconnected from her Indigenous roots because of colonization and the Indian Act, this event is a warm welcome for others to join in that conversation. To share some insight on that bigger picture, here's former Grand Chief and previous Chief of Norway House Cree Nation, which is at the top of Lake Winnipeg in Treaty 5. I'd like to call up Mr. Ron Evans. It's a long walk, Ron.
Walking alongside the lake. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for the invite. My name's Ron Evans. Was chief in Norway House for many years, Grand Chief of the Assembly for 2 terms from 2005 to 11. Went back to my community to be chief from 11 to just this past March. So I started a business. Wanted to go and share some of my experience with others in the consulting field. And I decided to do something. I thought I'd do something a little different than what everyone else was doing. And so I wanted to focus in on the calls to action, the truth and reconciliation, and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And so that's what got me here. That's how I got to a mutual friend of mine, and who is ours, with Cheryl and myself. I was sharing with her what I was doing, and then she introduced me to Dean and Jessica, who were, pretty much, we're all working pretty much in the same area. And so that's how I got to be here, my wife and my daughter. And so we are here for the evening to listen to Jessica talk about her experience. And So she asked me to say a few words about something that I shared with them when I met with them, and that's what I'm going to do. But before I do that, I just want to give you a little snapshot of what I'm doing. It's on the calls to action. There's very little happening on the calls to action. Those 94 calls to action, and it's a global the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. The TRC did some work, and they came up with 94 calls to action. There's Bill 262 was just passed this week. That now means that any law passed in Canada will have to comply with the declaration, and so there's not very much knowledge out there of how important it is. And so on the call to action 92, it calls for a business community to work with Indigenous communities, and there's a criteria there that they need to focus on, and this is where people like Jessica and others that do workshops and educate, create awareness and all of these good things so that people are aware. There's going to require a lot of people to work on that. So one way to do that is, I thought it's no different than ISO or being core certified. Get yourself informed, get yourself a certification, and to demonstrate that you've responded to the calls to action as a community. Doesn't matter which business you're in, it applies to all business. It calls upon all of us. So anyway, I did share that with them, and that's what we're doing. That's what brings us together. As far as her story goes, it's about her story and what happened in her life, and I shared with her in my time as Grand Chief. I was invited to a Portuguese community celebration. I think it was the time of Folklorama, and they were having a feast and dance, and in there I saw two Indigenous girls from here, somewhere here in Manitoba or in Canada here somewhere. And they were dancing. They were dressed in the culture of the Portuguese and doing the singing and the dancing. I thought maybe they were, obviously they were in care. I thought, but I guess they had been adopted. And so at the end of the evening, as we were leaving, they were standing outside. They must have been about 9 or 11 years old, and I took it upon myself to go and say hello to them and ask them from which community they were from. And the oldest one responded, says, "We're from Portugal." And I thought, oh, how sad that is, because that's not where they were from. And it really did something for me. It really did something to me when they responded like that, because in other words, they were lost, and they would have to find their way back eventually. And so it does have an impact, and I never forgot that incident. That was back in 2005, and anyway, I just wanted to share that with you. Probably lines up with what we're going to be hearing this evening. So with that, thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to say, which I hope was a few words. Thank you very much.
That was just a few words, Ron. Did you have a few more? The storytelling that goes on at TED Talks, at TEDx events, that is the best part of it. We all have our story. Everybody's got a story that puts you where you are right now. Everything's with purpose, and I think sharing these stories, living out loud so people can listen to them, so they can hear them, and learn from them. Whether they're right or wrong, that exposure to the stories is still more perspective than you're going to get if we all stayed withdrawn and, to ourselves. So, Ron, thank you for sharing your stories. Really glad that you're here to join us tonight. Without further ado, it's where it gets good, guys. I am delighted to introduce our feature speaker. Who is Jessica Dumas? You're all thinking, well, I don't know. She's a girl I go for soup with. Yeah. Because we have some new friends here, I want to share that Jessica Dumas is a professional lifestyle coach and speaker, world-class speaker, who helps small businesses launch and build a personal identity. Sorry, I flipped over to the hashtags. Use the hashtag social media. That's part of the branding and identity. It ties in with what she does on the side. She is also the owner of Jessica Dumas Coaching and Training, offering Indigenous inclusion training, engagement and consulting, and more. I've personally called upon Jessica to share some of her stories and what we can do as a business community with with reconciliation to a group of young professionals with JCI Winnipeg. We were hosting a conference in Winnipeg for Western Canada, and we had people from different provinces come in and listen to Jessica's story and wrap their heads around what is going on. The cool thing about that was it's not just a Manitoba problem. This is something that is, recognized a lot in Manitoba right now, but it's everywhere. So again, I've seen her on this stage and with our friends as well too. So thank you for coming and doing that. Not only does she speak and provide insight, she's also recognized for her professional experience through nomination as a finalist in CBC's Top 40 Manitobans Under 40 in 2015. It's 2018. Are you still 40, under 40? Just close? I'm close. I had my birthday last week. I'm still under there. Yeah, so nomination's in. She was also a finalist for the 2017 Future Leaders of Manitoba Award. So a lot of people recognizing her for doing a lot of great things. Kind of a big deal. Jessica and I first became acquainted at a Winnipeg Chamber event. As Chamber newbies back in the day, we quickly formed a friendship to help us navigate the events and to navigate being around the board table and to be new to that world of the chamber, of networking with business, with government, with people all at once. It's a lot. And so we quickly found the fun in it, and we haven't looked back since. I couldn't be prouder of what Jessica has accomplished, and I've had the pleasure of seeing her in action, not only at the TEDx Exchange District, but at a variety of events, ranging from the regional conference that we had with Junior Chamber International to She Day, and so many in between. A consistent message that always rings loud and clear at these events, regardless of who she is speaking to, is that there is a better way. Let's find it together. I'm excited to call up our very own Jessica Dumas.
Thanks so much for showing up. Thank you. Thank you very much to Danelle for coming and speaking and doing the icebreaker part for me, because I thought I didn't want to be doing this all by myself. So I knew Danelle was the right person, so thank you very much. And thank you very much to Ron Evans for coming to share some words, and to Joseph Ranseth for coming up and sharing. So what I'm going to share with you is a little bit about my Indigenous identity and how I got to where I am today. And I feel really proud to be able to say that when I introduce myself, because when my grandmother was young, she couldn't say that. It wasn't a safe place to say that I'm an Aboriginal person or I'm a First Nation person. So I feel really good about that. But as Danelle mentioned, since my friends encouraged me that I have to do an event, I have to do something and not just let it go on the internet, without making a big deal about it. It was actually sitting with Danelle and Abby, and they're like, "What's the hashtag going to be?" And I was like, "Oh my God, they're really pressuring me. I have to come up with a hashtag. Okay, this is serious." And so inviting people to this event and trying to come up with a hashtag really was, some really good pressure to think about, what do I want to accomplish with this message, and have a lot of thinking and a lot of conversations about identity, and I think that's really good, because then it's helping me prepare in what it is that I want to share with everyone, and what I'm hoping that people will take away with it after you hear it. I also wanted to share that when I was young, in my teenage years or up to my teenage years, I was really shy. And for many years, I was also really ashamed of who I was, because I remember, for example, meeting someone in grade 5 who was from China, and she had this language that she could speak, and she was going to see her family across the world. And I was like, wow, that is so cool. I wonder where we're from. Like, why don't we have a language? Why don't we know these things? And so for years, I was really ashamed, because I thought, well, we don't talk about who we are, so it must be bad. It must be something that I'm not supposed to talk about. And so for years, I kept my head down. I was really shy, and I didn't want to be heard. I didn't feel that anything that I had to say was going to be worth hearing by anyone. So crazy to be here today. But growing up in that teenage mentality of not thinking that I had a voice or that anything worthy to say, I think it wouldn't have been a surprise if I became nothing or if I did nothing with my life, because that was the reflection of what I saw of Indigenous leaders in my community. The only brown woman that I ever knew that had a career was one, and it was an elementary school teacher. And I never saw any Aboriginal women, doing things. And of course today it's really different, and I'm very thankful for that. But I was born into a system that wasn't made for me. It wasn't made for me to succeed. And so I'm excited that I've had this opportunity to share this message, which I'm going to share with you. And so I'll tell you something a little funny. So some of you would see that over the past year and a half or so, I have a lot of YouTube videos and different messages and stuff that I'll share on Facebook and stuff like that. And whenever Paul would watch something in front of me, if I could hear it, I'd be like, no, you can't watch that. I don't want to know that you're watching that. So to be playing this in front of all of you today is a really big deal. So I'm going to start the video, and I hope you enjoy. Woo! Good afternoon. I'm an Indigenous woman from Winnipeg, Manitoba. I'm a band member of Kisikunin First Nation, and my spirit name is Mayangan Ogichitakwe, which means wolf warrior woman in the Ojibwe language. Many of you might not know what a spirit name is because it sometimes sounds mythical. I think the first time that I heard of a spirit name was probably through a joke, and it was being phrased Indian name. The truth of Indigenous people was not always taken seriously. This is how we're taught to think of Indigenous people. The same reason that when I saw a chief in a headdress, that I didn't understand what it meant to be a chief in a headdress or what it meant to be an Indigenous woman. I grew up in one of the poorest areas in our city, in Winnipeg's North End. And in my neighborhood, when I was young, grown men would expose themselves to me and my friends, and men would stop in their cars and ask if we wanted to go for a ride. I have a story of a guy that I had a crush on when I was 16, hold a knife to my throat, and tell me that now I belong to him. But those are not the stories that I'm here to tell you today. This is what I want to share with you. There was a time when I was 27 years old, I was a mother of two, and I had a day off of work, and so I did what any other mom would do on her day off of work. I took the kids to daycare and did errands. On that afternoon, I stopped by my mom's house. My mom, my grandma, and my aunt were chatting in the kitchen, and my aunt was sharing that she heard that the police had shot a young man a few blocks down that afternoon. And so my mom, my grandma, and my aunt were accounting for all of the men in our family, cousins, brothers, and uncles. And the only person that wasn't accounted for at that time was my brother Matthew, who was 18 years old. And I thought, moms worry so much. Why do they think that has anything to do with us? Later that evening, feeling pretty accomplished because I got my kids into bed by 9 p.m., I was folding laundry by the light of the lamp, and the phone rang. And I called display so I could see that it was my mom. And I answered the phone and I said hello, but the sound that came from the phone I didn't recognize. I was trying to figure out if she was laughing. What is that sound? Eventually, after she took a deep breath, she let out the words, "That was your brother." And I knew what she was telling me in that moment, that cold winter afternoon, that the police killed my little brother. This was not the first time that we had tragedy in our family, but it was the first time that it was on the front page of the news for days, and it was the first time that it was on the 6 o'clock and 10 o'clock news. And it was only after that, which was the first time that I attended a chief summit, and I was told to stand for the grand entry. This is the first time that I saw a chief in a headdress. And I thought, a chief in a headdress? I thought that was almost fictional, a fairy tale or a legend. And I didn't know why I didn't know this. And I was embarrassed that I didn't know this. And I didn't tell anybody. But I started asking questions and just observing different things that were going on. Something else that was new from the community was that for the first time, the community was embracing us in a new way that I had never experienced. Me and my family were receiving gifts of sweetgrass, eagle feathers, and honor songs. And again, I didn't know what any of those things meant, but they were giving it to us with so much love. So obviously my life changed, my work changed. I wanted to do something that I felt was more meaningful for me. And this was the first time that I started working with Aboriginal people. I was working in an Aboriginal organization. And the people that I was working with were a lot like me, and their families were a lot like mine. And for the first time, I started to feel like I belonged, and I didn't even know that I was missing that. But my identity of who I was coming clearer. These are the gifts that my brother Matthew gave to me. It was the awakening of learning who I really am with a desire to really succeed, because Matthew didn't have that chance. I help our nation, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, learn about the history of the relationships between Indigenous people and the government. And I help them understand, as I learn, why some things are the way that they are. You see, government created specific policies, and they tried their best to prevent me from ever knowing about my relatives, my spirit name, and my connection to everything. They used federal strategies like banning traditional practices, which sometimes meant destroying communities. And they forced residential schools, where starting in 1883, families were threatened and forced to send their kids to kill the Indian in the child. And when these kids grew up, it happened to their children. And when their kids grew up, it happened to their children, and their children, and their children, for generations. This ended in 1996. I was born in 1978. When were you born? Still today, Indigenous children, through education, health, and justice, are greatly discriminated. Our jails have the highest Indigenous rates, and so does the child and family system. Our populations are young and growing, and some improvements have been made, but there's still so much work that needs to be done in our communities and in our everyday discussions. Much of the work is education, because a strong country knows their history, good and bad. And I'm so thankful for the work that I do, because, again, it's so meaningful to me that at the end of a session, when people are asking me questions like, why didn't I know this? How do I share this? And what can I do now? Losing my brother to a police shooting could have caused me to hate government, hate law enforcement, but instead I was open to asking and learning why. Why were things the way that they were? Why were Indigenous people treated so badly? And why did law enforcement have to be so extreme and so final? I wanted to be part of the solution because I still believe in a better way. I didn't want this to happen to anyone else's brother or cousin or relatives. Losing a loved one is one of the hardest things that you'll ever have to face. Loss can bring you down and hold you down in pain. I actually explored joining the police academy, and attending the RCMP depot was probably one of the most fascinating days of my life. I held a fake gun in a gun simulator, but I could never imagine myself aiming that at another human being. Policing just wasn't for me. But I have some very special people in my life that are in law enforcement. You know what some of the most meaningful experiences for me in this journey is listening to people's stories, is taking time to really listen, not judging people, but really listening for the sake of their healthy expression. Because when we hear people's stories, we begin to care, we begin to understand, and that's how you build community, and that's how you can strengthen a nation. It was after my brother's death that I also found the power in advocacy. I learned that when you're helping others, you learn it's okay for you to ask for help. And you learn that you're not the only one suffering, because we're stronger together. Our country is in a time of reconciliation, and everyone wants to know, what is the answer to reconciliation? What is the solution, or how will we know when we've been reconciled? One thing I know for sure is that it's not an event, it's not a conclusion or a project, but it's about relationships. It's when we can all be open to new answers and everyone can have knowledge, safety, and autonomy in their own identity. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here and sharing that with me. And you know what, as I was watching, I was thinking about the comment that I said about having everybody in the room watching me on the screen. But I think that those are the most important things that I want to say. So I'm really thankful for the opportunity. I wanted to acknowledge a couple of things. Tomorrow, my brother Matthew would have been 32 years old. My mom is in the room. This is Carol Chartrand, my mother. And my boyfriend, Paul Thagard. He's a police officer with the city of Winnipeg. And so people are often shocked that I'm dating a police officer, but we do a lot of talking. So what I've learned and what I want to share is that identity has a lot to do with our self-worth. And as we're young people, we're so formed by the media, formed by our society, and so it's tough. But I wish that each of you, is this still on? Yeah. I wish that each of you will have autonomy in your own identity, and so that you will give yourself permission to be who it is that you are meant to be, and that when you take that opportunity to let yourself shine, I truly believe this, that it lets everybody else around you have that confidence in their autonomy and will let them shine. So I really hope that you'll all share this message. I'm going to post it on my Facebook page, but you can take the YouTube link, and I really hope that you'll share it. I hope that you'll also share it with the hashtag identitystory, so that from today forward I can go and find more stories of people taking that opportunity to share their story and their connection to whatever stood out for them. I also, again, just want to say thank you for each of you for coming. There's so many cool people in the room today. But thank you again to Danelle for helping me at the mic. I want to say thank you to Kieran. Where's Kieran? He helped me plan this whole thing. Abby Matheson Photography, who's taking the photos today, and Mardell, who's helping her with that. And Sheena Grob is in the room, and she was also my speaker coach and also a TEDx speaker. So thank you for coming and for your support. And to Joseph and to Lori, who's also really just helping in support of getting this message out. So thank you very much.
How cool is Jessica, hey? Really cool, really cool. And we get to call her our friend in our circle, yes. Jessica, thank you so much for living out loud, for putting your voice out there, for taking the courage to take the stage and use your own personal tragedy as an opportunity for us to learn from, grow from, and become better versions of ourselves. And I think you're right, that is a gift that you are left with and that we are left with as a result. And we get to take that and make it resonate. So how cool is that? To each and every one of you that came out tonight, hopefully you start sharing your stories, as big or insignificant as you may feel they are. They are huge. They are so big and so important to what makes us really connect as people. Our stories are what connect us. It's our experiences are what connect us. And if you don't share them with everybody, with the people at your table, with the people at your workplace, with your families, we lose out as a whole. We all lose out. And I truly, truly believe that. And I really hope from tonight you take that call to action from Jessica to share your #identity story and let us all become better versions of ourselves while we build our world into the place we know it can be. So thank you for coming tonight and enjoy the rest of your evening.